My name is Nathan. As you've heard, I work for Airtable. I'm the support team lead. And I'd like to walk everyone through this workflow that I built out today. But before I do that, I want to just take a quick second. I noticed like over 60% of us said, hey, I'm a newbie at this. And honestly, me too. This was the first API integration that I've ever built out. I was very unsure of whether or not I'd be able to do what I had in my head. And I hope that seeing this example will really help kind of boost your own confidence and give you kind of that, if you need a little extra push, like, can I do this? Can I not? Like, give it a shot. It's really, I was blown away by how easy it was compared to my expectations. And I think when you see the actual integration that I built out, you'll be surprised at how short it is and how compact the API part of it actually is. So without further ado, let's get into it. So a little bit of background on our Guru instance before we started this. We brought over all of our cards and all of our content from another application. And that was all done by one of my colleagues, Tamara. And she did like an incredible, like just an amazing job bringing like tons and tons of cards over, getting everything formatted, creating an organization system within Guru to really set us up on a good foundation. And a core part of that was getting all of our cards divvied up into something called collections. And that's pretty central to what we're going to be talking about here today. But once that build out was done, the actual ownership for those cards and the verification of those cards was handed over to the Guru author team. And the way we structured this initially was we had all of our CSA team, all of our users as owners and as Guru authors. So everyone shared responsibility for verifying Guru cards. And basically that just means every set interval, we have to go in and say, hey, is this information up to date? No, let's change it, mark it as up to date, and then the interval starts over. And that gives us something called a trust score. And we found that once we launched, even though we had all of these authors, it was still Tamara who was really the de facto owner of all of the verification for cards, which with nearly 2,000 Guru cards was really too much to ask. We also noticed that the actual ownership of the library really, it kind of faltered. And when card verification actually did happen, it was very infrequent. It was very much dependent on the amount of work that individual CSAs had to do and if they remembered to go in. So if you look at the chart here, our verification, our trust score hovered between 70 to 85% pretty consistently from launch. And while this isn't terrible, it really wasn't where we wanted to be. Additionally, when people went in to verify cards, seeing, hey, there's 400 cards that need to be verified, that can be pretty overwhelming when it's just, you feel like you're doing it by yourself. So we saw this as quite a big problem for the health of our Guru library, and we decided we'd try and do something about it. We asked ourselves two questions. So number one, how do we improve our team's ownership of our content library? And number two, how do we improve our trust score? And we essentially came up with two different goals. So the first, building off of that strong foundation that Tamara set up, we wanted to distribute ownership of cards and verification of those cards by collection. And the second goal that we set up was we wanted to achieve and maintain an average trust score across all collections of 95% or greater. And that's, keep in mind, we were at like 70 to 85%. Additionally, this whole push really coincided pretty well with another internal initiative to centralize all of our performance data for our team. So instead of checking 5 or 6 different pieces of software to get metrics for team performance, we wanted everything in one place. So in addition to these two goals, we really wanted to get the trust score data for each collection, and then into an Airtable base so that we could then use that for reporting. So the first piece of this puzzle was actually doing the delegating. Who would be responsible for what? And as mentioned before, we already had the structure for this in place. We already had stuff broken up into collections. And we had 5 collections, so pretty manageable. And within each collection, we had X number of cards. You'll notice some of these collections are chock full of cards. Product knowledge is a beast. Others are a little more manageable. And we use the card count in each collection as well as the expertise areas of our different CSAs to determine how many people should be in charge of each collection, as well as which people we should assign to a given collection. So for product knowledge, lots of cards, we put 4 people in there. Accounts, plans, and billing, a little bit smaller, 2 people should be enough to keep that up to date. And again, we're shooting for 95% there. Once that was done, we actually needed to set up kind of the back end of the dashboard. And there were essentially 3 things that we needed to do. So the first, we needed to display the number of verified cards that were trusted in a collection, as well as the number of unverified cards within a collection. And those numbers were things that would change very regularly as verification expired and needed to be redone. And the second, really important, this is kind of the core thing we were after, is we needed to have the trust score for each collection. That was our KPI. That was our measurement of success here. And we could actually calculate that from those 2 pieces of data in the first goal. And the third one was something I wanted for myself, but I also wanted for the individual team members too. And this was a way to visualize how much work it would take on an individual level to bring their collection up to the verification level that we were looking for. To do all 3 of these, we really were able to kind of hone in on 2 pieces of data that we needed from the Guru API. Again, the number of verified cards in a collection, the number of unverified cards in a collection. With those 2 pieces of data, we could extrapolate out and calculate everything else. So it was nice to have that focus at the start to really kind of make this a manageable task instead of something that was way beyond my ability to build out. So the solution to kind of get to where we wanted to be, we essentially needed to use 2 tools. Guru's collections endpoint, which is the one that Mary showed you earlier. We would use that to get these 2 pieces of data from the Guru API. The second piece was Airtable's automations feature. We just launched this a couple of months ago, so it was great timing. But we'd essentially be using this as the vehicle to send those API requests and to do so on an automated basis. So myself or another team member wouldn't have to go in and manually update all of these metrics on a monthly, weekly, or even, heaven forbid, daily basis. No, thank you. So now we get to kind of the juicy part. So how do we actually get this automated? As I mentioned before, we used Airtable's automations, and automations essentially have 2 parts. The first part is a trigger, something that happens that tells the automation to start. And the second part is 1 or more actions, things that happen once that trigger has been activated. As my trigger, I chose to use something called when a record or when a row enters a view. And if you're unfamiliar with a view in Airtable, it's basically a window into a set of data that shows a subset of that data. And what data shows in there is determined by filters. So if you look at this setup, I'm looking at my table, which has 5 records or 5 rows, 1 row, 1 record for each collection. I have a field or a column here that's a date time, and it tells me the last time that this collection had its values updated by the API request. Once this has a value, I have a formula field here that basically checks and says, hey, is this time more than 30 minutes in the past? If so, tell me here, and it'll say yes. Now, this is essentially a timer that tells my automation how often to check Guru's API for that data. By setting my filter to only show records or rows where this says yes, I now have a means to every 30 minutes bring a record into my view, which will then trigger the automation and get this whole process started. All right, and now the actual integration itself. So right off the bat, I'd like to just call attention to the length of this. It's not a computer program. It's less than 30 lines of code. So if you are going to your engineering team, you're wanting to do something like this, they don't need to build their own app. It could be a very condensed project like this that might just take them a little bit of time to build out. This is JavaScript as well. And this is within Airtable, but there are other languages you can use too. But in terms of the actual structure of this script, there are three essential components here. The first part is an actual call to the Guru API. In Mary's analogy from before, this is going to the barista and making your order, saying, hey, I want a caramel macchiato, please. I don't know what customizations you'd add on that. I just get it straight. But this is what tells Guru the information that you're looking for. The second part is we get a JSON response back. If you remember from the REST JSON and the one other term that I'm blanking on right now. But this essentially parses that response. And what parsing is we're basically pulling the information that we need out from that JSON file. I don't need all of the information for this case. I only need those 2 bits of data that we talked about before. And we're assigning each bit of data to something called a variable, which we can refer to later. The last stage of this is where we actually use that data to update the table. So for trusted cards and untrusted cards, I'm adding those new values into the fields or the columns for each collection. There is one more part to this though, and this is what completes the circle and makes this automation truly recurring and able to run on its own. And that is this last line here. So remember that last updated date field in our dashboard. Every time this automation runs, it will actually add the current date time to that cell, which will make that formula evaluate to false, which would cause the row to disappear from that filtered view. That essentially resets our 30-minute timer. So after 30 more minutes, it would change to yes, pop back into the view, and restart the automation for that row. And the cycle would just go on. So the final product, as you can see, it's pretty condensed, but there's quite a bit of useful information here. So I have each of my 5 collections. I can see how many cards are in each collection, the amount of untrusted cards that are in that collection, as well as that trust score that we've calculated from those 2 bits of data we pulled from Guru's API. I do have an extra field in here. If you remember, I had 3 goals for this dashboard, and the third was a really visual way for myself and other members of my team to see the individual lift or the amount of work required for a single person to bring their collection up to date. And lift is a formula, and it essentially looks at the amount of untrusted cards as well as the number of authors, and gives you a ballpark for about how many cards are going to be verified by each person to bring that collection up to the verification level that we're looking for. For this, 15 cards or less per person, it's a low lift. Between 15 and 30, I set it to normal. 30 to 45 was high, and anything over 45 I labeled as intense and might need to call in for backup at that point. And most important, results. So you might ask, did this work? Was it effective? And looking at this chart, it was a huge success. we launched this, and within 2 days, our trust score across all collections jumped from 83% to 95%. So if you recall, that 95% was our goal, and it just took 2 days to get there. In addition, since we launched this, the lowest our trust score has been since this ramp up has been that 95% on day 2. And this is a huge reflection on just how much ownership our team has taken over this. They've been absolute machines and put in so much work, and I'm so proud. I'm so happy. It's super cool to see. At the time of making this presentation, our current trust score was over 99%. So that's like great job to my team members. That was incredible. In addition, just to kind of keep things top of mind, remember before, one of our problems was people remembering to go in and actually do these verifications on their own. CSAs get weekly pings where they can actually see their collections trust score in a performance dashboard that's unique to them. And some have even gone above and beyond and synced that dashboard to their personal tracking bases, where they can set up in the moment notifications. It's just like, hey, your collections trust score dropped below 95%, and they can hop right in and start verifying cards, which has been huge. We've had a couple moments where collections gone below, but within a couple hours, it's back up over 95. So yeah, that's all I have about this, but I'm going to kick it back over to Mary and Imtiaz, and I think we're going to go over some questions.